what helps with your classroom management the best? You know, what kind of helps reel in the kids when you're doing your lessons?
I think just the clear, consistent consequences and expectations. Like the kids have to know exactly what your expectations are, and you also have to consistently hand out those consequences. And one thing I'll
Mm-hmm.
do with my student teachers, because management is definitely the hardest thing to learn. Like it takes a while to figure it out. And you're trying to build that relationship. So like you don't really want to give like a strike one to a kid because you want to try to build a relationship with them. Then if you let that
Mm-hmm.
kid go, then the next kid next to them, and then three kids later, and then finally you just like give it to the nicest girl in the class, and like she didn't really deserve it, you know. So like
Yeah.
I'm always like, hey, when this class comes in, I want you to hand out 5 strikes in the first 5 minutes, and I can guarantee you kids are going to deserve it. So if they talk while you're talking, you give them a strike one, and that's a warning. And then like our expectation is strike two is a refocus. So then they go sit out, and you come and talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
And usually that is much more like if you start doing that at the beginning of class, it's a lot easier to kind of like everybody's like, oh, like Coach Landers is like really got a lesson, like he needs to teach us, we need to listen. Whereas if I
Mm-hmm.
just let it go, then it's like they're just doing it the entire class and then wasting time, and we only get like half the lesson done because everybody talks so much. Which that still happens, especially like we're right before spring break right now. We have a week left, and the kids
Mm-hmm.
are just like off the walls right now.
Absolutely.
So it's not like it's a like 100% effective solution, but it definitely I think helps a lot to just make sure you're really consistent with those consequences.
Do you find your consequences and your management style is pretty similar across the board with all grades, or do you find yourself doing different things with like high school level or the middle school?
Well, I only teach K-5,
Oh, okay.
but with the older kids, it's you just you have to have like I always somebody got mad when I made a video about lowering your expectations for like kindergarten, first grade. So I guess I should
Mm-hmm.
say not lowering, but having what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word. It's not lowering your expectations; it's having
Mm-hmm.
realistic expectations. Sorry,
Yeah.
um, but it really is lowering your expectations because you're like my expectation for kindergarten now is I'm like A, they just learned how to walk like 3 years ago. And B,
Exactly.
they were sitting inside in a pandemic for 3 years and didn't even like go to a restaurant and like learn how to socialize
Mm-hmm.
with anybody. So my expectations for them is really low. So I have empathy for them when they do the wrong thing. Um, but I still like the way that I talk to them is gonna come off different than the way I talk to a fifth grader, you know. But the
Mm-hmm.
conversation is pretty much the same. Like if I'm handing out consequences to kids, I always try to do it with I call it a oh no mindset, like which means you don't necessarily have to say oh no, but that needs to be like the vibe that you're putting off to that kid when you give them a consequence. Like it's not like you're mad at them. It's like, oh man, I wish you weren't talking while I'm talking. Like, strike one, let's make sure we don't do that again. Or oh,
Mm-hmm.
strike two, I wish you didn't do that. Go have a seat. I'm going to talk to you in a minute, because then that reminds them that you're sad that they did that and that you're on their
Mm-hmm.
side. And then like when you go talk to them, they're more open to a conversation versus if you are negative or mean to a kid. When you give the exact same consequence, they're not really going to want to talk to you when you're coming to try to bring them back into the class. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that helps a lot. But the conversation is always like, hey, do you know why you're over here? Do you know why you can't do that? Like getting back to that why of,
Yeah.
oh, because if I talk, then I'm not going to learn. And that's why I'm in PE class. So you can try to help me learn. And the kids around me can't learn. So then just like, are you ready to do the right thing? Cool. Let's get back in class, you know?
Yeah, and
Um,
I found that's kind of the best way. I look at some of my students, and it's almost making the expectations or your classroom management like a self reflective process with your students. I find a lot of times kind of similar to what you mentioned, almost like asking them what's kind of the expected behavior in the class and what are we looking to achieve today. And a lot of times it kind of just takes asking that question for students to be like, oh yeah, I'm not doing what I'm told, or I'm talking while you're talking, or maybe I didn't play that game fairly and things like that. And I find it's actually quite effective, kind of letting them almost dissect their own behavior.
yeah. It's funny seeing the kids like start to figure it out too. Like the kindergartners will always at the beginning say, I'm like, why can't you talk while I'm talking? And they're like, because you'll have to go to timeout. And I'm like, no, that's not why. Like that's what happens, but that's not why you can't talk. And
Yeah.
it's like their minds don't grasp yet the reason behind like the consequences. So my goal is for especially the littler kids is like to help them understand the reason you can't talk is because then you're not gonna be able to learn, and that's why you're at school. And my fifth graders will be like, "Cause when I'm talking, people around me can't hear you, and then I can't learn anything. And you want to help us be a better version of ourselves?" Because I've had so many of the same conversations with them, they know
Yeah.
what I expect.